Hello and welcome to day 25 of Reading the Power Broker. Today we have a very special guest, David. Wave hello.
Oh,
There are no people here yet, but there will probably be some people that show up.
What's up, chat?
Unless they're doing something really fun on their Saturday night.
My name is David. I'm not reading the Power Broker, but I hear Annie reading it all the time.
You should probably tune in next time.
Yeah, what's it about? It's about like a stockbroker or something?
David, it's not really that funny
All right.
of a joke. I kind of want. Should I just start over?
The whole book?
No, the stream. You have to be supportive of my book.
I love the book.
It's one of the most famous nonfiction books in the world.
Whoa. Like the Bible?
Okay, so basically what's happening right now is there are a bunch of rich robber barons that live on Long Island. It's the 1910s.
Mm-hmm.
Well, early 1920s actually. And Robert Moses is the head of a parks division in the state of New York. And he is basically negotiating with the robber barons because he's trying to build 2 highways on Long Island. And some of them are sort of cooperating, but others are not. And he's just really ruining their lives. And he has the powers because he wrote the law and he did it in a really weird way. He has the powers to just take their land if they don't make an agreement. So basically people are forced to negotiate down so low. And yeah. Anyway.
How old is he at this point?
30s.
Wow.
Yeah, he has 2 kids and a wife, but the book never really talked about them.
Nice.
In the former court. Oh, also, okay, what just happened was that guy named Macy, who's not trying to sell his house, he is getting really bad press because he's not good at talking to the media. And Robert Moses is so good at manipulating the media. So the New York Times just ran that big headline being like, wow, rich people refuse to build transportation and parks. And so then basically all the people are totally on Robert Moses' side. In the former court, Moses could not evade the facts that the Times had relegated to paragraph 26. And paragraph 26 was talking about all the reasons why the homeowners were resistant. Sometimes legitimate reasons. When, as he had promised the Times readers, he did fight the injunction issued by the local judge asking the state Supreme Court to invalidate it, Supreme Court Justice James C. Van Sicklen refused. Quote, the defendants have proceeded and are proceeding and threatening to proceed in a manner which tends irregularly, illegally, and beyond their powers, under and in violation of the laws and Constitution of the State of New York and of the United States, to invade and seize the property of the plaintiff, Van Sicklen said. The injunction would remain in force until a full trial was held. Such a trial, the judge made clear, could result not only in the return of the Taylor estate to Paukagoo. Paukagoo is the company that's owned by one of the robber barons. I forgot which one. But also in the assessing of substantial damages against the Long Island State Park Commission, against the individual commissioners, including Robert Moses, against New York State, and even conceivably against Governor Smith. To indicate his own feelings in the matter, Van Sicklen ordered the commission to pay Paukagoo a symbolic $10 in court costs. Now, Moses' only hope was the legislature. If appropriated, quote, segregated was the legal term, $250,000 of the bond sale revenues for purchase of the Taylor estate, he could argue that the commission had seized the estate in anticipation of the segregation. I'm confused about what this means. Also, I'm going to blow out my candle because it's getting a little too hot in here. I don't know the difference between segregation in this context and appropriation, but whatever. Okay, so this was a weak defense So if he argued that the commission had seized the estate in anticipation of the segregation, it would be a weak defense, but at least it was a defense. If the legislature did not segregate the 250K, the commission, Moses, would have no legal defense at all. He would have no money to pay for the land he had taken. I'm confused a little bit, but it's okay. The legislature, however, was controlled by the state's Republican Party, and that party was dominated financially by the barons, philosophically by a concern for the rights of private property, precisely the rights endangered by unstatutory appropriation, and politically by its desire to embarrass Al Smith, the man who had shattered its control of New York State. Because, in its view, one of Smith's appointees had broken the law, and Smith had, by signing the appropriation form, helped him do it. They saw an ideal chance for such embarrassment if the facts of the case were brought out. On February 11th and 26th, 1925, the Senate Finance Committees held hearings in Albany. Throughout the hearings, despite the efforts of Finance Committee Chairman Charles J. Hewitt to gavel him into silence, Moses was on his feet, berating witnesses. Quote, "I never knew of persons to come before a legislative hearing with dirtier hands than the people of East Islip," he shouted at one. But shouting could not drown out the facts. To refute Moses' contention that only a few rich golfers opposed the park, more than a dozen elected officials testified that the majority of Suffolk's 150,000 people and Islip Township's 21,000 residents opposed it. The chairman of Suffolk's Board of Supervisors, the county's governing body, testified, "We are opposed to the methods of the Long Island Commission. We are afraid of persons who act as they have." And when Moses himself was summoned to the stands, the questioner was F. Truby Davison, a name that we've definitely heard before, but I cannot for the life of me remember anything about F. Truby Davison. And Davison had learned a great deal about asking questions since the day, a year before, on which he had agreed to introduce Moses's park bills. "Did you have the money available at the time the appropriation was made?" Davison demanded. Quote, "That is a question for the courts to decide," Moses replied. "Well, did the commission believe it had money available to pay a reasonable value on this property?" Davison demanded. "Yes, we did," Moses said. "The money appropriated to the Long Island State Park Commission by the 1924 legislature." "Well, let us see about it," Davison said. "The legislature appropriated $225,000. Did you spend any of that money before the Taylor estate case came up?" "Yes, some of it," Moses admitted. "Well," Davison said, "how did you arrive at your arithmetic? You had only $225,000 to start with, and you admit you spent some of it. How could you have enough to cover the Taylor case?" "We think we had it," Moses said, but Davison had made his point. After the hearing, Moses printed up transcripts, unquote, of the hearing, with his own damaging admissions carefully omitted, and mailed them to state officials and legislators. That's so insane of him. That is so crazy. Do you think that's crazy?
That is insane.
But the officials and legislators had followed the hearings themselves, so they knew that he was conveniently omitting everything that made him look bad. "The state has an obligation to have money available to pay people before taking their property," said Attorney General Albert Ottinger, a Republican. Moses' actions, said the state's chief legal officer. Moses' actions, said the state's chief legal officer, were clearly illegal. The day following the hearing, Assembly Speaker Joseph A. McGinnis said that the legislature would strip the power of appropriation from the commission. And he said that the legislature would certainly not segregate any money at all, ever, for the purchase of the Taylor estate. Love the double commentary from the mysterious voice in the background. David.
Yes.
You have fans.
Oh, yes. What's up, guys?
I don't think David really pays attention to what I'm reading.
No, I'm locked in.
What
I
just
thought-
happened?
When you said you have
Describe the
fans-
last scene.
When you said you have fans, I thought you were reading a line from the Power Broker.
There are allegedly 5 people watching this.
Oh, baby.
Describe the last scene that I just read.
It's 1969, and LBJ is becoming the master of the. Oh, wrong book. I'm sorry. I don't actually know what happened.
It was a pretty exciting court case where Robert Moses was being a shady little guy.
Oh no.
Basically, he was trying to buy up the estates so that he could make his dream highway, but he was being really predatory, and there was this Taylor estate that he really wanted to buy, and so he was offering money that he really never even had to offer. And then he went to court, and things did not really go well for him. And then he printed up transcripts of the court, but he omitted all the parts that made him look bad, and he sent those to a bunch of people with power as if they were like the official transcripts, but they weren't. And then the people were like, no, we have our own transcripts. Like, we know you just cut out all the stuff that made you look bad.
Is he a good guy or a bad guy at this point?
That is the huge question.
Oh wow. Right
But
to
he
the heart of the
hasn't
matter.
become like totally horrible yet.
Gotcha.
Like he's always been pretty whack, I think, in some ways, but not
Yeah.
evil. I don't think he's evil yet either. He's just weird.
Guess we have to keep reading.
Yeah, I know. Good thing we have so many pages for things to get more dark.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In the legislature and the courts then, the issue appeared in February 1925, all but settled. To realize a dream of unprecedented scope, Robert Moses, by use of the law, had armed himself with unprecedented powers, and then, finding that these powers were still inadequate, he had deliberately gone beyond them, beyond the law. Entry and appropriation was, even as defined in law, of questionable constitutionality in its negation of the individual's rights when his property was coveted by the state. And Moses had gone beyond the definition to use the power of the state with even less restraint than the law allowed. But both courts and legislature understood the situation. Before both courts and legislature, Moses stood stripped of all defenses, and it seemed in February 1925, wow, 199 years ago this month, it seemed back then, both courts and legislature would now step in and rectify the situation. The courts by affording redress to the individuals injured by his actions, the legislature by ensuring that he never again had the opportunity similarly to injure any other individual. But the ultimate court in which the fate of Moses and his dream was to be resolved would be the court of public opinion. And in this court, Robert Moses had close to hand 3 formidable weapons. I'm excited. What are the weapons? 1 was the fact that, like motherhood, Parks symbolized something good, and therefore anyone who fought for Parks fought under the shield of the presumption that he was fighting for the right, and anyone who opposed him for the wrong. The second was the fact that it was possible to paint the issue, as Moses had already done, not only as Park supporters versus Park deniers, but also as wealth versus lack of wealth, privilege versus impotence, influence versus helplessness, rich golfers versus the sweating masses of the cities. The third was his ultimate political weapon, Alfred Emanuel Smith. Do you know Al Smith, David?
I know the Al Smith dinner.
What's that?
It's a big annual political stop on the political tour where both candidates go and have a big dinner, right? Am I thinking of it right?
Sounds right. It's probably in New York.
Don't they roast each other?
Well, okay. I was just going to tell you a little bit about Al Smith for context.
Whoa.
Don't focus too hard on the dinner.
I'm focusing on the dinner.
Can I tell you a little bit about who Al Smith was?
Yes.
Okay, Al Smith was the former New York City governor, and he was part of Tammany Hall. He was a poor Irish immigrant, and he really didn't show that much promise until he became elected into some law position in New York State, and he just became super well read and also really beloved. And he didn't have a high school education or a college education, but he was so much more well versed in the law than anyone else. And then he ran for president in 1928, and this is literally his campaign slogan. It was something like "Have a Wet Dream" with Al Smith, and the
Oh,
idea was like
oh,
he
thank
was
you.
gonna like allow people to drink alcohol because it was prohibition.
Oh,
That's Al Smith.
I love that.
But he's really tight with Robert Moses.
Copy.
Okay. So the courts aren't really siding with Moses stealing people's land, but the public is totally on board because for as long as rich people have existed, people have wanted to eat them. The Republican majority in the legislature drafted a bill introduced by upstate Senator Warren T. Thayer, segregating $6 million of the see. Every time they say segregating in term like when they're like segregating money, I don't really know what that means. Maybe I'm just dumb. Okay, so this bill segregates $6 million of the bond issue for acquisition of various parks, but not appropriating any funds for acquisition of the Taylor estate. The bill also amended the laws Davison had introduced on Moses' behalf the year before. It eliminated appropriation as a method of obtaining parkland in developed areas, and also provided that all land acquisition for parks or parkways, including acquisition by condemnation, must be approved by the Republican-controlled State Land Board. This is totally new. We've never heard about this board before. That all park or parkway construction must be approved by the Republican-controlled State Board of Estimate and Control. Okay, so 2 approvals. That all engineering work on parks and parkways must be carried out by the state engineer, who is an elected official who was then a Republican, and that all legal work connected with parks and parkways must be carried out by the office of the Republican State Attorney General, Albert Ottinger. So it's honestly so crazy how many Alberts we've had introduced to us in the past 5 pages. During the last week in March, shortly before adjournment, the legislature passed the bill. Smith vetoed it. His veto, says Eberly Hutchinson, chairman of the Assembly Ways and Means Committee, was clearly the work of that expert and abusive propagandist, practiced in exciting the prejudices of the uniformed and a habitual defamer of the legislature, Robert Moses. Okay, so basically he vetoed it because Robert Moses wanted him to veto it. But the veto did not help Smith or Moses. They needed $250,000. If it wasn't segregated, Moses' actions would be declared flatly illegal in court, and no governor would be able to put a good face on such a development, especially a governor who was, even peripherally, and only because he had been misled by an appointee, involved. Early in April, Smith told his advisors that he would summon the legislature back into special session to try to force it into the segregation. Moses' only hope of not having to appear in court without money or promise of money for the appropriation was to stall court proceedings until after the special session. So he's just trying to stall court proceedings. And it just took me a second to realize what that meant. Frantically, the commission's attorneys employed every legal stratagem available. They moved to strike certain clauses out of Paukugu's complaint. Van Sicklen, who's the judge, I think, denied the motion. They appealed his decision to the Appellate Division of the State Supreme Court. The Appellate Division denied the appeal. They appealed the denial to the Court of Appeals. Then they went back to Van Sicklen's court and moved to strike other clauses. Van Sicklen denied the motion. They appealed the decision. April dragged into May. The case, the judge commented, should have been tried long ago, but the commission attorneys filed new motions. Then they sought judgment on pleadings, a device which required the filing of a long series of successive briefs by both sides. Their briefs ran longer and longer. One was 275 pages. Then they appealed the decisions of the appellate division. Every appeal was denied, but everyone used up time. And I'm trying to remember why. So basically, the reason he had to stall for like that many months was because he didn't want to have to appear in court without money. So maybe he's waiting to get the money or something. I don't really know why we're stalling. Macy raged at the delays. Macy's the medium rich guy from Long Island who's mad at Robert Moses. Macy raged at the delays. Quote, a speedy determination of the issue is what the public, the county, and the state are entitled to, he said. Although his rage did not require new fuel, Moses provided some anyway. Macy, the lover of antiquity, had determined to reserve one of the 30 home sites for himself and to restore the old Taylor mansion, a fantastic mass of pillars, turrets, and cupolas. Cupolas. Do you know that word?
Cupola.
Cupolas, and its outbuildings to their original condition. But one Sunday in May, strolling around the property, he found the walls of the boathouse riddled with bullet holes.
No.
Now you're paying attention. Targets tacked to the walls explained them. The state troopers had been using the building for pistol practice. As he stared aghast at the damage, he heard someone coming through the woods and turning saw another Sunday stroller. You will not guess who it is.
Baby Gronk?
Robert Moses.
No.
They should have a shootout. Macy protested to Moses, pointing out that the courts had specifically forbade the commission to injure the property in any way. Moses replied with a grin. It's lucky it was this building. We're going to tear it down anyway. He's such a troll.
He really is.
Once let him... Okay, I don't really know what this sentence means. Once let him get Moses on the stand, Macy was sure, and the boasting would stop. He hungered for the court decision, which he was certain would vindicate him, but Moses kept stalling. So did Smith. All through April and May, Moses, anxious, was nudging the governor to call the special session. So for less personal reasons were Smith's other advisors. Since he had a great mind, they said, wouldn't it be best to press it while it was still fresh in the public's mind? Since he had a great issue? What? Okay. Wait, Smith said. He had thought of something his advisors hadn't. New York City wasn't hot in April. It wasn't hot in May. New Yorkers weren't desperate to get out of the city in April and May, desperate for a bathing beach such as the one the Taylor estate would provide. In April and May, they hadn't yet reached the point at which they didn't care at all about the legal technicalities of park acquisition. They hadn't yet reached the point at which all that mattered was that someone was trying to provide them with a place to swim, and someone else was standing in his way. On June 1, a Monday, the first of the inevitable summer heat waves settled over the city like a hot, soggy blanket. Let's go. The city's people fled it. Traffic jams on Long Island were worse than ever. So great was the frustration that when the motorists reached a town park in Huntington and found police barring the gates, they assaulted the police in such force that more than 40 were arrested. That's how hot it was. On June 10, Smith announced that the special summer session in a speech that was the first ever carried on the statewide radio hookup. That's a really interesting fact. Did you hear that, David?
Yes.
It was
Who did he hook up with?
It was the governor's first. You have to pretend to be interested in the book. It was the governor's first speech that was a radio. That was announced via radio.
Governor Al Smith?
Yeah. Okay, quote, there are people in the state who are opposed to parks, Al Smith said. His rasping, friendly, compelling voice sliced through the static of the crystal sets in tens of thousands of steaming living rooms in which sat families who had spent that last weekend in a desperate search for parks. There are people in this state who are opposed to parks, to the park program, because they do not desire public parks or parkways too close to their private estates, golf clubs, and fox hunting and polo fields. Smith spoke for 2.5 hours. That's crazy. Slowly, painstakingly, he detailed the whole background of his side of the fight. The attempts to remove parks from politics, the Republicans' insistence on injecting into park administration other politically dominated state agencies, on making the final decision on proposed land acquisition rests not within the State Council of Parks, but within the State Land Board. Let us compare both bodies, he said. Let us see who are the members of the Park Council. He listed their names, lingering over several. Everyone knows Judge Clearwater, he said. He is one of the leading lawyers in the country. He has been connected with the Niagara State Reservation since its establishment many years ago and has repeatedly been reappointed by governors of all shades of political opinion. Everyone knows Franklin D. Roosevelt. Yeah, we know that guy. One of the heads of the Boy Scout movement in the country. That's kind of fun. That's what FDR was known as, the Boy Scout guy. Many of these men, he pointed out, were Republicans. All were serving the state without pay. Many have contributed large sums of money from their personal fortunes for the purchase of lands which they have presented to the state as a gift. So that's the Park Council. Don't get it mixed up with the Land Board. Okay. Quote, or what is the Land Board? Al Smith asked rhetorically. A purely political body. Its entire staff consists of one clerk and 2 land appraisers, all political appointees in office only since last January. They don't visit the lands, he said. They don't even know where they are. Okay, so Park Council, Land Board. Where, he growled, did the suggestion come from that the board be injected into the park program? From wealthy people on Long Island who want the program to be controlled by an agency that is easily subject to influence and manipulation. The land board had never even been mentioned in connection with parks until the Long Island State Park Commission proposed taking a little bit of their land. Slowly and carefully, the governor spelled out his side of the Taylor Estate and Northern State Parkway fights. The need for parkland on Long Island, the great natural beauty of the spot selected, the attitude of the opponents, a few wealthy men at the Biltmore hearing. Quote, as between the few and the many to be benefited, Al Smith said, I cast my lot with the many, and I signed the papers necessary to acquire the property by entry and appropriation. Immediately thereafter, high-priced legal talent was brought in to defeat the purposes of the state, unquote. It was from them and from their masters that the suggestion came to place the park program under the land board and to paralyze the program until this was done because they knew that, quote, before the land board, the golf club would probably win. So, Smith said, there is a greater question here than the park councils, attorney generals, or land boards. There was a question of what will ultimately become of the $15 million authorized by the people. Will it by choice park spots and locate parkways where there is fine air and scenic beauty, or will money, power, and influence compel the state to buy for the people that which nobody else wants? The people are either, I'm going to read the rest of this paragraph and then probably be done. The people are either going to get these parks and parkways through the properly organized commissions, or this program will be given into the hands of the very few men who now desire to weaken it in the interests of the few. And Al Smith wound up his speech as only Al Smith could. He was willing to leave the question to the people, he said. I am laying it before them in plain everyday language, and I am leaving it to them to serve notice on their servants and representatives in the legislature, just exactly what their wishes are, he said. The cure for the evils of democracy is more democracy. Let us battle it out right in the shadow of the Capitol itself, and let us have a decision, and let us not permit the impression to go abroad that wealth and the power of wealth can palsy the arm of the state. All right. So basically, Al Smith is like really acting like he's going to be able to take people's land, even though the courts have made it pretty clear that that's not really allowed. But that's really awesome. I'm excited about this. Okay, I'm ending this. See you tomorrow.
Bye, guys.